one of the podcasts that I listen on basically this guy has 3 podcasts a week, so I listen to this guy 3 times a week. He always interviews people. He interviews people. So on the interview, he always closes the podcast with a question. And this is the question that he asked, and I want us to wrestle with this question tonight as we read Psalm 90, because I believe that the question is going to be applicable to Moses, as we believe he's the writer of this Psalm 90. And here's the question. He always asks these celebrities. He says, if you were on your dead bed, you're dying, and all of your children and all of your grandchildren, assuming that you are old and you had kids and, they're coming to you, and everything that you have done, and again, these are celebrities, so these people, they have done a lot of stuff, right? Writers or songwriters or movie makers or whatever. Everything has been deleted. There is no track, there is no trace that you have existed on this world. You're dying, and your grandkids come to see you, and they give you a little piece of paper, and they said, Grandpa, great-grandpa, would you please put or tell us the three truths that you believe about life? So the interviewer is asking these questions, and then the interviewee, he has to think about, okay, after all these accomplishments, after all these things that I've done, what are the things that I will tell my kids about life that truly, truly matters? Now again, these are not Christian podcasts, so people come with really weird stuff as they are, processing, okay, this is it, I'm going to write 3 things about what life is about. I believe this is what's happening with Moses in Psalm 90. We're at the end of 2016. I'm not wishing that anyone has to write the truths about life, because I hope to see you in 2017. I'm hoping you get to see me in 2017. So no one is dying. But at the same time, I believe Moses is saying goodbye in Psalm 90. This is the guy that took approximately 2.7 million people from slavery of how many years in Egypt? 400 years. And this is the guy that goes and takes all these people into a journey of how many years in the wilderness? 40 years. And basically, as he is coming to the end of the journey of the 40 years, he is reflecting over the things that truly matter in life. So as you think about this beautiful 2016, with all the challenges, with all the craziness, with all the brokenness, and all the excitement of this 2016, here's what I want you to hear from Moses as he comes to the end of the journey. And he says on chapter 90, verse 1 of the book of Psalms, Lord, he begins with that statement. It's right there for you. Lord, you have been our, read it with me, dwelling place. You have been our dwelling place, not just to me, not just to my kids or my grandkids, not just to the 2.7 million people that potentially left Egypt and journey into the promised land, not just to the ones that will enter the promised land, but you have been our dwelling place throughout how many generations? All generations. Look at verse 2. Before the mountains, just in case that you don't understand what all generations means, all the mountains, before they were born, or before you, God, brought forth the whole world, before those things happen, what happens to you, God? From everlasting to everlasting, what happens? You are God. You are God. So this is what I think Moses is trying to bring, and this is what I believe the scripture is teaching us if you are at the end of the journey. I don't know if you get this whole picture of what, from Moses, just thinking about verse 1. You have been our dwelling place. The word dwelling place is refuge. And this sounds really, really ironic and contradictory, because you got to remember, this people, Moses specifically, had no place. They have not arrived yet. So they are literally just nomads. They're just going, it seems to me, in circles, over and over, just in wilderness and facing people, but they have no place, no specific rest place or place of actually for them to build a life yet. But he finds that God Or in this case, the place is not just a piece of land, or it's not just simply a real estate, that ultimately is a person, and it is God. So he finds this concept of refuge. That's what we're looking at. So first of all, I want to say to you is this. Moses is helping us to remember that Israel, the nation, the people, they're very special to God. And I don't know if you have failed that 2016, you have been special to God, but think about it. All these people, from slavery into the wilderness, all this crazy stuff, Moses comes to the conclusion that rest, refuge, protection, as vulnerable as you are walking in the wilderness, vulnerable to the sun, vulnerable to animals, vulnerable to the enemies because people battled them, Moses is, he has become, you are God, my dwelling place. And then the other thing that we see in here, not only how Israel is special to God, but the other thing is, look at how the Bible describes the eternality of God. One of the things that you find with God is that you find that God never simply promotes or projects or promises safety for your life. I will even argue that if you make a commitment to follow Jesus, that's exactly the least thing that you're going to find safety. I think following Jesus is literally following Moses' example is, from being the prince of Egypt, moving into 40 years in basically just shepherd, I guess, just, on his little world. And then suddenly encountering God, the burning bush, and then going back and delivering the people from slavery. I don't know about you, but I find no safety in that story whatsoever. And again, they're in the wilderness. So here's what I'm going to say to you. If you disregard the fact that you are special to God, and you disregard the eternality of God, the character of God, you're going to try to bring or move into 2017, not looking for a person that is refuge, but simply safety in your life. Now, I'm all for your safety, don't get me wrong, but all that I'm trying to tell you is this, that if you and I were going to become the men and women who see refuge not as the absence of struggles or the absence of calamity, of the absence of risk or danger, but a person. See, Moses says, you have been our dwelling place, even though we have no place, even though we are no people, we have no systems, no identity, no educational system, we have no religious system. I mean, we're just here. All that we have known for 400 years is literally work very hard, have a bunch of kids, and worship the god and goddesses of the Egyptians. That's all that we have known. That's all that we are. We don't know who we are. I mean, we've heard of this Abraham father that had encounters, but we feel completely isolated, forgotten. Isn't that the people of God in this time in history? And Moses affirms and says, I've seen your cry. I walked with you for 40 years, and I can assure you that God is our dwelling place. So he is our refuge. In the words of David in Psalm 46, he says, he is our refuge and a strength. He is a present help. Anybody can finish that? In time of. So here's the thing. When he is your refuge and your strength, you and I typically say, if he's my refuge and my strength, then trouble disappears. No, listen to the word. Trouble is still present. He's just your refuge. Does that make sense? That's the promise. The promise is not that 2017 is going to be, immune from challenges and risks and things like that. All that I'm saying is that he has become our dwelling place. So I hope in your closing 2016 with that sense of understanding that it was not about simply improving, getting ahead, getting the next promotion, or finally getting married, or finally getting whatever, and I'm all for those things. Just listen. I'm not against those things. I hope you prosper. I hope you have a better 2017. But here's the bottom line, because these verses will make more sense to me if Moses is writing Psalm 90 at the promised land. He's not at the promised land yet. And you know the story. Is he going to make it? I'm sorry, he's not going to make it. That's a pretty bad deal, isn't it? Again, I'm not trying to discourage you. You're going to make it, all right? You're going to be fine. But you're going to begin with this understanding that God is your dwelling place. And again, when you recognize Him as your refuge, look at verse 2. You and I understand that from everlasting to everlasting, regardless of what happens, I am confined with my finite, I'm limited with my mind. You cannot think beyond time. Is that a fair statement? You can't. I can't. God can. God goes beyond the concept of time because He is God. So look at verses 13 and following. This is how we're going to close tonight. Just bringing Moses into this conversation of again, everything has been deleted. Moses used to have a Twitter account, no more, it got deleted. A Facebook account, a bunch of selfies, deleted. Can you imagine your account's gone? Instagram, gone. Nothing. Moses, writing, gone. What are the truths that you want to remind us? You want to remind to us, Moses? Here's what he says. Relent, Lord. Relent, Lord. How long, this is Moses, will it be? And then here's how Moses answers his very own question. After he is wondering for how long, again, I've seen the suffering of this people. I've seen, these men and women crying out to you and then living in disobedience at the same time. And he says, how much longer? How much longer? And he says, have compassion. Have compassion. So tonight, here's what I hope and you are discovering or have come into the conclusion of 2016, that you know the God, that the compassion and the mercy of God is not simply a doctrine, that the love of God is not simply something that you have embraced because your mama or your grandmama told you that God is love, that the love and the mercy of God is not something that you just understand because God is lovable. But I'm asking you to think that tonight, as you close your 2016 and you move into 2017, that you embrace the reality that not only that God is your dwelling place, no matter what happens, that God is from everlasting to everlasting. So that implies that His compassion and His mercy is not simply a doctrine, but it is literally my world view. I have no time to read the verses between what I just gave you, but you will read in the same chapter a lot of calamities, and these people will suffer a lot. Some of you are coming from a 2016 that you have gone through very difficult times. And you and I know that if we are in this place, it's because God has been merciful to us. But mercy, compassion from God cannot simply be embraced as a philosophical, doctrinal truth. It has to be perceived as a lifestyle. What is this mercy? Satisfy us. Look at the urgency of Moses. Satisfy us in the morning with the word in here in the original language is the word chesed, that it speaks of the unconditional love of God. Now, obviously, in the Hebrew mind, this is how the Hebrews thought. This unfailing love is very tangible. So Hebrews or Old Testament people, they were not thinking about doing their best, dying, and then going to heaven. That's not the mindset of the Hebrews. The Hebrews believed on the unconditional, unfailing love of God because they have seen for 40 years manna come from heaven. They have seen clothing never wearing down. They have seen a column of fire during the night, and they have seen the cloud protecting them during the day. Is everybody tracking what's happening here? They have seen the tangible manifestations of the unfailing love that comes from God. So here's how, and this is why. Because we may sing for joy, and we may be glad all of our days in this life. So today, what I want you to see is the gladness of this people. Watch what's happening. You're going to be glad. You make us glad. You help us to be glad for as many days as you have afflicted us. Come on. The conversation is real between Moses and God. You got to make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us. So apparently God has afflicted the people. For as many years we have seen, what is it? We have seen trouble. Have you seen trouble in 2016? The promise is that He will bring gladness in the same depth or in the same experience. So here is what I want you to take with you today. For some of us, that we are followers of Jesus, even when God has brought His discipline on us, every single time that you and I encounter in 2016 struggles and challenges and pain and suffering, was with the purpose as a child of God to be corrected or to be disciplined. If you're not a follower of Jesus, for those who do not put their trust in Jesus, they might go through the same experiences. Doctors' reports may be exactly the same as a follower of Jesus. What is the difference? That one is for correction and the other one is for destruction. You read in the Old Testament that the same prophet that speaks against Israel turns around and speaks against Babylon. And the same thing happens to both to a certain degree, but this one is for correction and this one is for destruction. This one is for discipline and this one is for desolation. So today, if you're coming from a 2016 that you have found yourself in the middle of deep conflict, that maybe your faith has really vanished and you question the existence of God, I wish and I can tell you where God came from. Moses said in verse number 1, we just read, that He is from everlasting to everlasting. You are God. The Bible doesn't tell us where God came from, because the Bible doesn't care about where God came from. The Bible cares about teaching us that even when you go through the deepest of pain, whether you went through 2016 or you may find yourself in 2017 going through some of the most difficult challenges, you make God not the place where you are safe, but the place where He gives you refuge. Because He is your God, because He now is the God that has taken all the pain, all the suffering. We're reading that, and then He brings it into gladness. Look at verse 16. May your deeds, God, your deeds be shown to us again, because we are your servants. So your splendor brought into the life of your children. And He closes by simply saying this: you, God, have the ability to preserve us. You, God, have the ability. Moses, come on, think about it. This is Moses speaking. He's at the end of the journey. And Moses, I said this last year and I'm going to say it again. Just figuring some math. This is not straight from the Bible, but this is what historians will tell you. If there were 2.7 million people approximately that left Egypt and were supposed to go into the promised land, and you and I know, because of disobedience, the generation that left Egypt and we're supposed to go to the promised land didn't make it. So God looks at Moses, and you know the story. He looks at Moses and says, Moses, if you move out of the way, I'm gonna wipe the entire population, this whole generation, and I will begin a brand new generation through you and with you. And Moses obviously stops God and says, please don't do this. But listen to me for a second. Even though he doesn't do that, the reason why it's going to take 40 years to go from Egypt into the promised land is because God, He's very good at math. He makes the calculations and He gets 2.7 million people. How long will it take me to kill 2.7 million people? I will have to kill approximately 15,000 people a year. So I can literally finish this generation and get a brand new generation, which are the children, into the promised land. And that's what you know the story, because as you turn the page from Deuteronomy chapter 31, which is the death of Moses, you turn the page into the book of Joshua, and you're going to see Joshua taking the children of the people that are listening to Moses. Because God decided that He will not be mocked. God knew that He is the God who will preserve His promises. And when we disobey God, we may miss the wave of God. But you see what is the concept later in the Old Testament of the remnant. So here's the thing. If God, once again, look what the Bible says. If God shows or brings his deeds, his preservation, and God shows or gives his splendor to the people, which he did, it's for the sake that you understand that God has preserved you. He has preserved you. He has preserved me. So what do we do tonight with this preservation of God? Glad you asked. This is what we do. Verse 17. Now we may be or see the favor of the Lord that will be resting on us. So when the favor, the preservation of God, even though we were rebellious, even though we did things that we are not fully, proud of what we have done, now this preservation has to be exercised in perseverance. Look at what the Bible says. May the favor of the Lord, mercy, compassion, from everlasting to everlasting, the dwelling place coming into our lives. What do? We simply continue to work, and we ask the Lord to establish the work of our hands. We ask the Lord again, yes, establish the work of our hands. So God preserves you, you persevere. God preserves you, you persevere. I'm going to say that again. God preserves you, you and I, we persevere.